There is a question that was published one morning, my friend, and nobody imagined it would be answered that very night. The question was simple and cruel at the same time. What happens if a player on the Eagles roster turns out to be too good in the preseason? It sounds absurd, I know. No team ever complains about a player standing out. Except there is one very specific case inside this roster where shining too brightly in front of the cameras might be exactly the worst possible outcome for the franchise. And in the preseason opener, on the very first snap of organized football in his entire life, this player pushed back a man who was a third-round pick in the NFL draft. The defensive line coach gave him a pat on the head and smiled. And in that instant, without anybody noticing, the math on the Eagles roster got a whole lot more complicated. The truth is that there is a rule buried in the league's regulations that turns this story into a minefield, and it could cost the job of a player who has done absolutely everything right since he arrived in Philadelphia. Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel right now, because the cut down to 53 is coming, and this is the strangest decision Howie Roseman is going to have to make this month. Let us set the scene. For several years now, the NFL has run a program called the International Player Pathway, created to find athletes outside the United States who have rare physical potential, but no background whatsoever in American football. In the 2026 draft, the Eagles used pick number 251 in the 7th round to bet on one of those athletes. A 21-year-old kid born in Abuja, Nigeria, standing 6'5", weighing 306 pounds, with an athletic testing score of 9.90 out of 10 at the international program's Pro Day. He did not play any sport at all until he was 16 years old. He had never put a helmet on before this year. His name is Ouar Bernard. And until very recently, the official message inside the NovaCare complex was one of absolute patience, if not outright discouragement. Asked about Bernard and about the other international program product on the roster, Vic Fangio was blunt with reporters. He said it is going to take a long while. He said the media could drop that subject entirely. And he used a phrase that leaves no room for interpretation. They are light years away. Coming from a coordinator who rarely exaggerates in either direction, that sounded like a verdict. Just how raw Bernard still is becomes clear in a story Moro Ojomo told reporters. Ojomo, who also has Nigerian roots and has become a kind of cultural translator inside that room, described the rookie walking up and asking, in so many words, what on earth an A-gap and a B-gap were. In other words, while the rest of that defensive line was discussing how to read a combination block, he was still learning the most basic vocabulary of the position. And even so, even with no pass rush repertoire whatsoever, the practice reports all said the same thing. He was simply running over offensive linemen on raw strength alone. Analyst Ryan Fowler noted that Bernard had been popping repeatedly in one-on-one drills. In Baltimore, that raw strength showed up on television. On the first snap of his life in an official game at any level, Bernard hit Emory Jones, a Ravens tackle who was a third-round pick last year, with a bull rush and drove the man backward. Clint Hurt, the coach who practically begged the franchise to draft this kid, gave him a pat on the head and broke into a smile. Later, in a goal-to-go situation, Bernard got himself into position to stop the run, but the running back broke the tackle and crossed the line for a touchdown. Right effort, right positioning, wrong finish. That is exactly the portrait of an athlete whose body is ready and whose instincts are still under construction. Nick Sirianni, asked about it afterward, avoided evaluating the tape and preferred to talk about the journey, saying it was exciting to watch those two kids playing in an NFL game, and that he would need to study Ouar's performance more closely before offering an opinion. Those two kids, by the way. The second name in this story deserves its own paragraph: Joshua Weru. Weru is Kenyan, came out of rugby, and had also never played a snap of organized American football. On the very first offensive series he entered, he had already registered 2 pressures on the Ravens quarterback, forcing an incompletion. Sirianni praised his speed coming off the edge. In other words, the 2 projects the defensive coordinator had described as light years away produced, in their debuts, more memorable moments than the entire backup offense produced all night long. And here is where we reach the trap. The international program gives teams an extra spot, number 17 on the practice squad, with a special protection. Once a player is placed there, he cannot be poached by another franchise the way ordinary practice squad members can. It sounds perfect for Bernard's situation, since he needs a year or 2 of quiet development. There is just one detail, and it is a fatal one. That exemption does not allow anyone to skip the waiver line. To reach that protected spot, Bernard first has to be waived at final cuts and pass through all 31 other franchises without a single one of them claiming him. And that is exactly where the preseason turns into a problem. Every snap of his broadcast on national television is free scouting material for teams that also have defensive line coaches dreaming about a body like that. If he shows too much, somebody claims him. And if somebody claims him, Philadelphia loses for nothing an asset it spent months cultivating. The obvious way out is to keep Bernard among the 53. And that is where the victim nobody is mentioning in this conversation shows up. Ty Robinson. Robinson was a fourth-round pick last year, and he is, today, an actual football player with a repertoire, technique, and production. In the preseason opener, with 8 minutes and 53 seconds still on the clock in the first quarter, he exploded off the ball, knocked down the opposing guard's arm, and sacked quarterback Tyler Huntley. That sack pushed the Ravens into a 49-yard field goal attempt, which was missed. It was by a mile one of the best individual moments of the entire night for Philadelphia. And even so, he is fighting for his life. The math is simple and brutal. Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Moro Ojomo, and Byron Young are locked in. If the Eagles decide to hold Bernard on the main roster to avoid losing him on waivers, that closes off 5 interior line spots. That leaves Ty Robinson and Gabe Hall fighting over a 6th spot that may simply not exist. And it is worth logging how unusual that would be. Over the last 25 years, only 3 Eagles' 4th-round picks have failed to reach their second season with the franchise. In 2005, in 2011, and in 2018. And that is why we need to be fair and transparent here. First, one successful bull rush on one preseason snap is evidence of nothing. Emory Jones was probably thinking about something else. The context was third-string football, and Sirianni himself refused to evaluate the tape before studying it. Turning that into a prophecy would be dishonest with you. Second, Vic Fangio may be completely right. A player who needs to ask what an A-gap is will not be playing meaningful rotation snaps in a defense that demands constant communication and anticipatory reads. The physical talent is undeniable, but his learning timeline is measured in years, not weeks. Third, there is a legitimate counter-argument in favor of holding Bernard on the main roster. Roseman has already paid a high price for losing young assets on waivers, and the cost of carrying a 7th-round pick for one season is practically nothing against the salary cap. If that body really is irreplaceable, risking it is worse than stockpiling it. And fourth, none of this means Ty Robinson is doomed. He can simply win the competition on the field across the 2 remaining games, and the front office may conclude that present production is worth more than distant potential. Smart teams change their minds when the tape changes. So the question I leave with you, Eagles fan, comes in 3 parts. First, would you accept giving up a spot on the main roster to a player who is still learning the vocabulary of the position just to avoid handing him to another franchise for free? Second, if the choice comes down to UR Bernard or Ty Robinson, who do you keep? The body of the future or the producer of the present? And third, do you believe Vic Fangio was being realistic or simply shielding the kid from pressure when he said he is light years away? Leave your opinion in the comments. Do not forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. I will be back later to update you with the latest Eagles news.